Hello and welcome to the Fellowship Phase, an Adventures in Middle-earth podcast. I'm Josh and that's Callum. We're going to give you inside information on how to find your own path through Tolkien's world.
While Ellaras has become rather taciturn, he can still be a useful, if unexpected, ally for travellers braving the heights, for he knows a great deal about the lost holds of the arid Mithrin. Far more, in fact, than many dwarfs do. Ellaras' quest has brought him into conflict with another searcher in these peaks, Thrar, the Beardless, and the two are rivals of sort, crossing blades as well as words on more than one occasion.
Hello, Callum.
Hello, Scott.
Hello, Callum and Josh.
Yeah, definitely done. How are you both?
I have to say that's very rude, Josh.
Is it?
Yeah, you just said hello to me, didn't say hello to Scott.
But I was expecting that you would then say hello to Scott and he would say hello to me.
Yeah, but actually, I never said hello to you. So actually,
You're
just
the rude one.
I'm the rude one. So sorry.
Tolkien would be very disappointed because he always does when characters meet each other is always like a really important moment, and we have done a terrible job of meeting each other.
Many meetings.
Many meetings. It's nice to see you both.
Lovely to see you.
Let's
And
see.
I'm excited because we're going to talk about something that is one of these behind the curtain things that you obviously both were involved in that as a player I wasn't, so I now get to hear how it all happens. That's fun. What we're talking about today.
Well, you can ask the questions. What are we talking about today? Well, maybe I can throw that question to Scott.
I'm asking the questions here. Scott, what are we talking about today?
Well, Josh, today we are talking about the once NPC turned PC turned NPC again, Ellaras the Searcher.
Ellaras the Searcher. Yeah, he made an appearance at quite a dramatic moment in our game, and it was a change of character for you, Scott. So it'd be good to get into. Now, how's best to talk through this? Are we wanting to talk about a bit about the creation of Ellaras, the background to it? How would you like to approach things?
Maybe we can just approach it in the angle, like in the order in which it happened in our game.
Mm-hmm.
So where have we been in the? So the last episode that came out was about the Tower of the North, wasn't it? And the creation of magical items there. I think we'd mentioned that our party had headed north, and there was this need to go and rescue Josh's character, Halmir's uncle from the bunker, which is Gundabad. At that point, Scott, you were playing
Karhu.
Karhu the Elder, Bjorning,
Yeah.
who we've talked about before, but what was going on with his story at that point?
So I think we talked about last time I was on, he'd met his sister and had things revealed from his past that had maybe changed his outlook on life and what the priorities were. And it was a real tussle for me as Karhu to decide, do I go and help my friends, travel with them to Gundabad? Halmir has done a lot for me. Or do I go home where there is a massive threat hanging over them and spend time with my sister? And I think we spoke between games, and I decided that Kari wasn't going to join the group.
I think you did a good job there of sort of arming me. Like sometimes as a player character, if you make a really bold, game-changing decision in the moment of being in the character, that can be really cool. But then as a lore master, you're a bit like, oh, how are we going to do this? But then I think you hinted at like the reluctance and that sort of challenge you were having in characters, and then we met up out of game like, well, what do you want to do? And then that led us to having a discussion saying like, actually, it doesn't really make any, I want to go on the adventure as a player, but as a character, it doesn't really make any sense for me to do that, which was really great for me, because then it was like, then we were able to have a discussion and say, okay, if you're not going with Garhoon, then well, the natural conclusion is we have another character. Also, heads up, Gundabad was extremely tough, so we probably needed some help in there. So yeah, do you remember what happened in that discussion? How did we? Because I think we talked about more than one option about characters, didn't we?
I didn't make any notes about who the other options were.
I don't really remember either. I think we did talk about like some ideas that you had, and I think you made a backup character who was an elf or something like that. Is that right?
I'd talked about a backup character I'd made who was an elf, but I couldn't think of why on earth a random elf would just suddenly appear.
Yeah.
Whereas I was reading my notes back, we'd already met Ellaras.
Yeah.
But Karu and Ellaras had a brief crossover period. So when you were like, well, there's an elf there.
Yeah.
In the area, why don't you just take him over?
Which
made so much sense.
It's really exciting for me because I've read some places that, particularly in AIM, where you've got a bit less option for Deus Ex Machina, like people just popping up with magic, you always want to have an NPC around, at least. I usually have designed it so that if you're in some remote area, I know who's around, so that if you need someone to come, if you're really lost and struggling, instead of me as the lore master just saying, do this, you can drop in that NPC. So Ellaras was in that area. He's in the book, and I'll find the section in the book in a second and tell you what he is. But he's quite an interesting NPC anyway. So I have that opportunity to be like, oh, here's something already that's going to work. He's got a backstory. So I think that's where we kind of started from.
Yeah, we had a good conversation about who Ellaras was. So I had a bit more of an understanding of the character I was taking over. And then we built Ellaras together. We turned him from a NPC into a PC, much like I did with Josh in Strad.
Yeah, we did much the same thing. There was a change of characters for a very different reason. I gave with Curse of Strad, and you were looking for a new character. And when we talked about that, you were very open-minded about who it could be. And as a result, I actually took a key character from the lore, a key NPC, was perfectly suited for you to take her over, Esmeralda. And that was fun to work on that kind of creation and what you didn't know. So I suppose one of my questions then for the two of you, you've identified that you don't want Karshu to come, which I thought was a really powerful character moment, because it's a big thing to say that this character that I've played for 50, 60 sessions is not going to join in this crucial adventure.
Yeah.
But it was a really powerful moment. As a player of one of the other characters, we always felt the Karshu was the big kind of martial threat. He was the one that protected us. He was the big damage dealer. So him not coming made an already very dangerous sounding quest seem even more dangerous. So then you've got an elf is going to be the character to fill the space. How much of designing Ellaras was based on we were going to Gundabad, it was going to be a difficult adventure, and you knew the party, you knew that Karshu had been a sort of tanky damage dealer? Or were you very much, I will just create a character regardless of what I already know about the party and the situation?
Can you remember? I didn't have any thought process of Karshu's this massive meat shield that we're suddenly not going to have. I was genuinely thinking what makes the most sense for Ellaras to be, not, oh shit, there's this massive gaping hole now.
Yeah, I don't think we did any sort of meta thought about it. When I think I think basically the discussion, we talked about various options. You mentioned wanting to be an elf. I was like, well, actually, if you want to be an elf, there's this guy Ellaras that you've met. We could make him into a player character. Would that be something you're interested in? And then we had a bit of a conversation, and we co-created the character. There's on page 67 of the Lonely Mountain Region Guide for AIM, there is a character or NPC character sheet for Ellaras. Just realized I should have this in a different setting. And in that, he's not just an NPC character sheet, but he's very good at survival, perception. He's moderately tanky. His challenge rating is 3. And he's got some stuff about being desperate. So he gets advantage, he's got low hit points. He's got a dagger and a bow. And there's a bit of a backstory there. So he has a motivation, which is, I cannot tell you of what I seek, but if I could, you would agree that there is no more noble quest upon Middle Earth. Pretty cool. I don't know if I actually told you that.
That's pretty strong stuff.
Yeah, he's got such a rich backstory. So there's a backstory in there about he's an exile from Mirkwood. He was set on this quest. In the book, essentially, they were meant to recover some lost treasures, but he failed, and he was the sole survivor. He was sort of found raving and mad, and essentially was exiled. And now he's searching for something else. Now, we amended that. We'll come on to that. But I thought it was quite an interesting starting point of like, why is an elf? Because that was what your question was when your character.
Yeah.
And then he was like a pre-written thing. Like, he's been exiled.
Yeah.
And then we were quite loose about what that was in the beginning. So maybe we wanted it to be a bit more. I think we did decide in the end what it was.
I think when I was reading back over my notes, Ellaras, I'm assuming we came up with this. I'm not sure that Ellaras was.
He knows Quenya.
Yeah, Ellaras was loyal to Legolas's mother and was exiled because he refused to side with Thranduil. And I was like, lore! Woo!
That's awesome.
Like, talking lore, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's such a cool reason to have been banished. And that he knows Quenya.
Yeah, it was a bit of a, because there's a whole thing about the different groups of elves and the Noldor, who are the sort of main group that went over to the Undying Lands and then came back, and they speak Quenya, and the elves that never left. So there's, now James is going to correct me. I always get this mixed up, but there's the Sylvan elves who never went across, and then there's a Sindarin who lead them. And essentially, Quenya is the language of the elves that went to the west and came back, and Sindarin is the language of those who didn't. And so Quenya's got this connotation, I think, in the books and the lore. Thranduil and the elves of Mirkwood have a bit of a difficult relationship with the Noldor because they killed some of the other elves over in the Undying Lands. So there's this tension, and there's some stuff written in the AIM books about how Thranduil's wife, that maybe she was of the Quenya and died and wanted to treat Legolas Quenya, but Thranduil didn't.
Yeah.
And then bringing in Ellaras as this sort of person who's in there and learns Quenya even though it's banned, and there's that sort of tension about it.
Yeah, which I found very cool because, as I said the last time I was on, I don't know that much about Tolkien lore, and I'm just like, oh, Legolas, I know that name. I like being able to understand, because the way that you described that sort of the reason why he had been exiled made total sense to me. Why he had been kicked out of Mirkwood.
Yeah, and it fits in really around what his background was.
So his background is driven from home.
Driven from home, yeah.
Yeah.
So which is a really cool background in the books, and it's all about that sort of exile, what the reason for that is. So there's a sort of rich backstory. And how did that affect like when you were role playing Ellaras? Because I always found like he was like such a different character from Karhu in terms of how he interacted.
He really was,
particularly at the beginning.
So I was reading my notes, and instantly my notes as Ellaras are so different to my notes as Karhu. I just found weird, like fascinating about why my brain did that. He did not trust the party until they got out of Gundabad.
Wow.
Like every session in my notes are, I was like, yeah, I could stay and save them, or I could leave and save my own skin because this is really dangerous. I don't really have any attachment to these guys. I've got 2 permanent shadow points, so I am mistrustful as fuck. And there was about 3 occasions where stuff got really bad, where Ellaras nearly left and was like, I could just ghost out here and leave them. And I don't know if you'd have survived.
I don't know if we would have survived either, because it was touch and go throughout. I must say that as a player, Josh, thought you were going to scurry off. And Halmir, I think, thought the same.
Yeah.
And for Halmir, it was Halmir's quest. Everyone was along with Halmir, but it was the driving force was that it was Halmir's uncle who had been captured, and we believed was in Gundabad, and he was like, I have no way of turning away from this quest. I'm doing it now. He totally understood why Karhu didn't come, even though that was really tough for Helmir, because Karhu was this warrior who he saw as being like basically superior to almost anyone else he'd seen. He felt if any of the party could survive Gundabad, it would be Karhu, but understood why he left. And then Ellaras rocks up as someone he just doesn't really know. He has a sort of affection or affinity for elves, but Ellaras didn't really do very much to ingratiate himself in the party. Helmir found him slightly suspect, and I think because he was sort of in exile, there seemed to be no real explanation of why he was in these very unelven lands. But Helmir was so much, I have a clear objective. My uncle is here. We need to rescue him. We need all the help we can get. Ellaras is a skilled warrior. You could come to. But it was completely different from Karhu, who he had this real, like, quite brotherly bond with. Like, Ellaras was very much like he is a fellow adventurer who is just here. And I did not trust him at all.
I didn't refer to any of the characters by name.
Really?
For sessions. It's just the dwarf said this.
It was really unsettling.
The man of Gondor said that. In my notes, it's just nobody's got a name.
Why did you do that? Was that like a deliberate?
Yeah, I think
choice?
it was like a way in my head to be like, this guy has been around for centuries, has been alone for a very long time, doesn't trust anyone, so why bother to learn their names?
Yeah, why make attachments?
Yeah,
like
like
it's easier.
they're probably going to die. I hope the dwarf dies. He hated Rhovanion for a long time. Rhovanion was like really annoying, and that was really fun to play with
Your brother.
with Stuart. I fucking did.
Something I enjoyed, I think this is true of this particular situation we're in, but I think it's probably applicable to any time you introduce a new character, is parties obviously have their own like internal kind of dynamic to them, and that partly comes from the players, different types of players. Some people are leaders, some people kind of form the kind of moral compass of a party, other people are the ideas, but different dynamic. By that point, as a party, we had been characters and players together for a very long time, and we were all pretty bonded together, again, as players and as characters. What I think is interesting then is if you take out a piece of that puzzle and then you put someone in who doesn't have any of those kind of emotional connections or history, they might have a shared goal. I think it then makes, when you do have a challenge or like puzzle to tackle, it's completely different because they approach things in a very different way. Not necessarily going to make a sacrifice for the others, whereas all the other characters would have pretty much given their lives for each other. Ellaras is, well, no, I'm not. I'll approach this in a much more rational fashion. And it changed the dynamic of in combat and rules. Like, we took away a big chunk of rules and abilities that we knew and had formed a big part of our party for a long time, which is we would be able to do things that involved strength, athletics, combat. All of that got taken out of the party, and then we're suddenly like, oh, this elf, what are you good at, what are you not good at, how do we now tackle problems and stuff. So I think it's a fun challenge for a group of players to throw in a completely different character.
Yeah, it kind of disrupts the way you've been doing things. And I think that point there about what can you do is a great segue into the next question, I guess, which would be like, how did you build Ellaras? Like, what was he good at? Was he good at anything? Spoilers, he was very good.
He was terrifyingly
yes, he was.
Some things. Dex. Rubber strength, but Dex through the roof. Stealth, sneak attacks. I'd never played a rogue or a treasure hunter. Sneak attacks are terrifying.
Yeah.
So much damage. And I think you've got the character sheet there. Yeah, so he was driven from home.
Yeah.
He had a special lore about spiders, which made sense.
Yeah.
And what was his hope?
I will find a way to return home.
And your despair.
I can trust no one. Everyone will ultimately betray me.
Which fits so well with that distrustful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when we were talking about building him, so he's There's like different subclasses of treasure hunters, isn't there? What was he?
Assuming he'd be burglar,
Yeah.
would make the most sense.
What was his sort of key skills? And I guess the other thing that would be worth talking about is like the virtues that you chose, because that's something that changes the character quite a lot, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So we talked a fair bit about that, and he was one of the only characters to have magic.
Yeah. The elf magic virtues are
Um,
really cool, aren't they?
And by the time I stopped playing him, he had all three of the wood elf magic
Yeah.
abilities, which
I don't think we've talked about before on the podcast, or maybe we have. We were going to do an episode on magic in the game at some point, 'cause that's a popular discussion. There's quite often people on Reddit posting questions about how do I use magic in AIM. I have an opinion. I'm sure everybody else has an opinion. We'll talk about it. But this is a built-in to the AIM rules. I really don't know if it's Lord of the Rings 5e. We need to read up on that. But yeah, how does that work as a virtue, the wood elf magic?
I believe
Is it for you?
we said that he started with one, which I don't know if that's technically what's supposed to happen when you're building a character, but
Well, you started him at quite a high level when he was coming in.
so you start with elf lights. I can make a torch or lamp burn with a peculiar flame. Spending inspiration, I can force any speaking creature to make a DC, whatever, wisdom saving throw. Upon a failure, they must move directly towards the light. I may snuff out the light at will, even from great distance, to either extinguish the flame quickly and quietly, or cause it to flare brightly. This causes them to be blinded and confused. They must succeed in a further wisdom save, or have disadvantage on everything and all they do for the next round.
It's crazy. And it's
Everything.
straight from that Hobbit scene where the
Yeah.
like the dwarves and Bilbo are going for the forest and they see the lights. It's like it's such a thematic magic power. Like I think
It's
they're
really cool.
ways to implement. It's not like just a spell; it's an ability. And I think he also gets a stinging arrow.
Stinging arrow, which he did use occasionally, was very useful as well.
Yeah, you can spend a hit die to make an automatic range critical hit. That's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Really clutch from memory of a couple of occasions as well when we knew we needed to be quiet. We needed someone to go down.
Yeah.
And it would just sneak it out.
And it's got cost. Using those hit dice, you did get some short rests in, and Ellaras, I don't know how injured was he when we left. I think he managed to avoid the worst of things until near the end.
Uncanny dodge was huge. That definitely kept him alive, but he was down to about 6 hit points by the time they got out.
I think pretty much everybody started with over 50 hit points, and by the end, nobody was above 10.
Yeah.
Even with short rests.
Yeah, we were absolutely messed up by couldn't about it. It was really hardcore.
How did you find that sort of play style of being the sort of rogue treasure hunter compared to Karhu?
It was very fun. Very different to Karhu, just rage, run in, hit things. Being able to think about things more tactically and think, okay, we need to be quiet in good and bad. Karu would have changed the situation so much. Running, we needed to be as quiet as possible. So having Ellaras tell the group to shut up and stay here, whilst I sneak ahead and take out these two guys silently, made the most sense and worked a lot of the time. Occasionally it didn't.
It did work a lot, and I also think that you managed to make that interesting for everybody, because I sometimes think the fear is you've got one really stealthy character and they always sneak up ahead.
Yeah.
You know, it can be a bit like they're playing the game and everyone else is just watching.
Yeah.
But I guess because you were all so invested, people really cared. And also, I did sometimes try to subvert that, being like, well, people might come up from behind, or there might be puzzles where it's like areas that it's difficult to go through one at a time, or there might be a gate or something else that you. So I found that was quite an interesting challenge, actually, because Ellaras was really hard to pin down, I'll be honest.
Yeah. I mean, there were treasure hunters' abilities to bonus action dash and stuff makes them a game even more powerful, having the extra movement in this. He felt instantly very different to Karhu, which was very helpful. and a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it was quite nice because you said that when you made Carhu that you just started playing the game, you wanted something simple.
Yeah.
And then this really demonstrated like how much, like the way that you used Ellaras and used all those rules, just demonstrated how far we've come in our sort of journey.
We all know what we're doing quite well now with the 5e.
Yeah, it was really fun. What was your impression, Josh, as another player character with Ellaras? Obviously, you said that it changed the dynamic within the group quite a lot. Any other thoughts?
It definitely did change the dynamic a lot. And I think you're right about that thing of playing a rogue or treasure hunter, of sort of sneaking ahead. This is something that a lot of fantasy RPGs sometimes fall into, is that it ends up one player doing the dungeon themselves because they sneak through several rooms, or they avoid, or they, probably the thing that bothers other players is they make decisions which they would do on their own, which is, do I sneak past, do I kill this guard, do I try the trap or whatever, which sometimes when you're then watching can be a little frustrating. I didn't find that at all with Ellaras and in Gundabad. And I think what it was, Ellaras brought something to the party that we didn't have. We didn't have a stealthy character, particularly. Rhovanion was pretty stealthy, but he wasn't anything like Ellaras was. And what it was like was almost that we got, in kind of cinematic terms, we got to see slightly further ahead, and the party knew there was danger of some kind. It didn't help us solve the danger, really. You weren't a cheat code that got us through things. All that happened was you would go in and come back and tell us that something awful was there. I think it actually heightened a lot of the tension a lot of the time, because it was a way for you to be the kind of eyes and ears of the party, and then for Callum to use that to explain what was coming up, which then the party would then decide like how we're going to tackle this particular challenge. You're like, is it a room full of orcs? How do we prepare? Oh, it's a trap, or there's a patrol. Sometimes you do something where we had to act quickly. There wasn't time to make a decision. It was like, someone is coming. And I actually found having Ellaras really helpful. And I think if we hadn't had that, a lot of that kind of jeopardy just wouldn't have existed, because we wouldn't have been able to sneak ahead. We would have ended just stumbling into each problem at a time, which is a different challenge, but I think that there's less tension doing it that way.
You're a party that seemed to really like planning stuff, and it was a really nice way to give you the opportunity to do that. And also, I think sometimes if it's one player in the lower master, it's actually an easier way to describe. Like when you all, like recently I was running a game and you were all a boat, and everyone was trying to do different things at once, and I had to be like the way I would manage a meeting at work. Like you go to one person at a time and like make sure everyone's involved and bring in the group, more like an educational thing, I guess. And that can be quite challenging because it's like there's so many different people, everyone wants to say their thing. But with you going up ahead, it was like you go into a room and then all I have to do is describe to you, you ask the questions you want to ask, and then you come back and nobody else could really get involved. And that kind of made it a bit easier. And then you go back to the group and then they would ask you questions, and then I would be like, oh, well, I would either just describe it as if you'd seen it, or if it wasn't maybe something that was so easy, get you to do a skill check to see if you noticed or recalled or whatnot. So yeah, actually, I found that you do have to factor that in. And when I was designing stuff, I was thinking like, I was deliberately trying not to make everything just a line of orcs all the way through Gundabad that you could just take out one by one, like in a stealth game.
I can't man my way through this.
Yeah, it's like the whole of Gundabad is just Ellaras like absolutely taking names. But yeah, it as long as you have that in mind, I think it can work really well. I guess it's pretty normal to have someone that's super sneaky as well. It's not exactly an unusual challenge for running the game.
Something I also really enjoyed about introducing, and this applies again not just to our game, but to any RPG where you swap out a character, whether that's because a character dies or retires or there's narrative reason that they're missing a segment, is when you've been with the party for a long time, people fall into naturally a particular role in the party of the thing that they do, generally because it's the thing they're best at, and it makes sense for the character to be built around that. So with us, with Rhovanion, he was the wanderer, he was the scout, he was knowledgeable about the land. With Carhu, he was the damage dealer, really. He did huge damage and was a tank. He was the kind of fulcrum of anything we did in combat, which was great. But when you take that out, suddenly someone else needs to sort of fulfill that role, which became Halmir, because he's the other kind of martial character. But he then had to adopt quite a different role. He had to basically be the frontline fighter from that point, which meant some of the other things he did, he contributed much less with his bow and arrow, which meant other people had to do that. And I think what it does is it lets everyone in the party try something slightly different. That you get to do other things because there's a gap. Ellaras comes in and adds something new, but you all have to fill up the stuff that is left. And I think that's fun. That's a fun way of doing it, because you can get quite used to like, oh, well, the optimal thing for me to do is always going to be fire my bow. So I'll always do that. And then suddenly it's, well, we don't have anyone to swing a sword, so you better do that.
Yeah, get that shield up in their face and hold the line. Yeah, no, I think the main thing I took away from it was like how much I had learned from running the game for so long. And like when we first started the character, we talked about this before, it was very much, I don't just like use the characters and doing that. And we'll talk to Bert about Dior, I hope soon, about doing that sort of co-creation. I think helped me understand what you wanted from the character, what you wanted to experience, and then I could build that in. So I guess in terms of the narrative journey, so he was searching for stuff, and we'll talk about Gundabad and Rivendell and what happens to Ellaras in the end. But how did you find that coming in? Because I wondered, I did worry like having an NPC that you might not feel like you had as much control, but I don't know how that was. Or maybe I can phrase the question as like, if people listening, how would you recommend from a player that if your lore master was going to turn an NPC into a PC, given that you've done this twice now, what worked well? What advice would you give?
Talk to your DM like in great detail. It was very useful having, you're both very good DMs. You're very open to players' ideas. Neither Ellaras or Ez, it didn't feel like at any point I didn't have any wiggle room. You were just like, you never were like, they are this and that's it. If you stray away from these three things, then you're playing the character wrong.
Yeah.
You were all both very good at saying, this is how their character is in the book, but you're going to be taking them on as a player character. You're going to be able to flesh them out more than you guys possibly would be able to as an NPC.
Yeah.
So there needs to be room for growth and movement in taking that character forward. You were really good with that with Ellaras. You gave me stuff about his backstory, but you didn't give me everything. You couldn't give me everything. He's 200 years old. But like,
it kept it very vague deliberately.
Yeah. So there was plenty of room for me to imagine why Ellaras is the person he is and why he is where he is in the world. And similarly with Ez, when I did that with Josh, you gave me a brief sort of overview of what had happened to her, why she was the way she was. But there was still plenty of room for me to decide who the character really was. And you're both very good at that. So talk to your DM. And it's actually quite fun to build a character collaboratively.
Yeah, I thought it was really fun.
Yeah, I
really enjoyed it.
A question, we'll come to at the end, a question I have, because it was definitely one way for us when we created or fleshed out Ez for you, Scott, in Curse of Strahd, which was your previous character had definitively left the party. It was a choice you'd made, had definitively left the party. The new character you took on, I think we both went into that process as being, this is now going to be your character for the remainder of the campaign, or at least until they die or leave or whatever. But it was pretty much a long-term permanent change. And something that I know we factored in then was, what are the party dynamics like? It was quite meta in terms of what kind of personalities, because we had a slightly dysfunctional initial party and we wanted to make sure that you would all gel together. So that was part of the decision making. Now, did you go into this with Ellaras knowing that Ellaras was going to be a limited run of games and you would definitely bring Karhu back? In other words, it didn't really, some of that party cohesion didn't really matter because it was temporary? Or did you go in quite open-minded thinking this might be a permanent thing and therefore I have to fit in with the party?
I went in with the mindset of, I don't know if and when we'll get back to Karhu. So I need to make this my character now. And if we get back to Karhu, great. The game could have gone in a completely different direction.
Yeah, it could have gone anyway.
Karhu, we might have never gone back to Karhu. So I always thought along the lines of, I need to be happy playing this guy for the rest of the campaign, which I think helped. It was more invested in the creation
it wasn't necessarily someone you throw, I'll run in and die. You know,
yeah, that's true.
You don't have that throwaway. And I think the dynamics just come really back to that slightly is I think in Tolkien's world, because the themes and like the alignment, I guess, of all the characters is so much more together. I found that I've never really played a game where there's been any difficulty to character dynamics, whereas D&D, because there's that allowance for more
that's true
range of motivations and alignments, that it tends to be a bit more sometimes difficult to get that power dynamic quite right. Even with the exact same players in the same group, the same experience. I think we've learned from that. But like, a lot. You know, my advice, I guess, there would be running evil or evil-ish characters in a party. It's really hard to get right, and actually can be quite difficult for your players. Unless you're all evil or all good. It's not even about that. It's about if there's a discordance, which I guess is the classic trope, isn't it? The rogue versus the paladin, the warlock versus the paladin, anybody versus the paladin. I've been speaking as a
paladin. I think that's really good advice about approaching it with the mindset that this is now your character, because Callum, you're totally right. If you approach it as this is temporary, maybe I'm only going to be in this for 3 or 4 sessions, you probably do start to act a bit like a caricature, because you might be like, well, I don't care if they die, because I'm definitely going back to my other character. And then some of that role play aspect slightly lost. I like the idea that you're committing to, well, this is my character, whether I play for 2 sessions or 50 sessions, like this is my character and I care about what happens to them.
What on the flippity flip though, there was one Critical Role episode.
Yes, was that when Chris Perkins came in to play a kobold? Yes, a very specific set of circumstances, but that was fun.
Came in, instantly died. It was amazing. You know, you can do that. Maybe
you can do that. I think that was a very deliberate thing, though. That was there as a kind of bit of comedy, but also as a bit of forward momentum for the game. We're going to make something happen, and you're then going to have to react to it. So yes, that was very funny.
So just, I guess, it comes to the end of the time that we've got Josh for. So we've got there.
I feel you were really close to a Gandalf quote there.
All we've got to do is decide with what time we do the thing that we're doing.
Yeah, that's it. You're nearly there.
So we talked about Ellaras, who is an NPC in the game, and Scott took on as a player character, and how we work together to make that work. Some stuff around about playing a treasure hunter and some of the wood elf magic we've briefly touched on, and then bringing a new character into a party that exists, how that changes the dynamic, and some tips for doing that. There's so much more we could talk about with Ellaras. We touched briefly on differing power levels. He was a very powerful character. Maybe we'll pick that up in the future, playing that sort of more villainous role, because he did have a sort of mistrustful. That was really interesting, and how he got on in the rest of his character art. But I think maybe we'll leave that for future episodes, because we're next going to be going into Gundabad. A lot of our game, I think there's so much interesting discussion there. We're probably just going to go through from beginning to end what actually happened there, and talk it through, break it down.
It was very fun.
It was very fun. And you'll hear what happens to Ellaras and through the story. I think his story's not even finished in our game. We need to see how it ends up. But a really great character. Really enjoyed running the game.
It was a lot of fun to switch over to him. Heart-wrenching to leave Karhu behind. But
it was emotional, but I'm really glad you made that decision. I think it was really in keeping with the character. It had a real moral kind of effect on the party, particularly on Halmir. So it added extra weight to what happened next. And it was a real curveball having Ellaras in the party. It really mixed things up for the most challenging bit of the game we'd ever done.
I think you're really good at that, Scott. Just like being, I think of all the players, perhaps being in character and like making decisions which often aren't optimal and often are like other people might disagree with even.
Yeah.
But like you can just see that you're so in character, and that's so great as a lore master, because I'm like, yes, he's done the thing, like he's mixed it all up, like he's pressed the button, and that makes it really easy to run the game when people are so in character that you don't have to have that sort of discussion about what's the optimal thing to do. You're just like, that was arguably a terrible decision, but
it's a lot of
was
fun.
what they would have done.
I love doing that as Carly in particular. Just being like, that's really stupid and a terrible idea. It makes sense as Carhu, so push.
I think this was one of the big bold decisions Carhu staying behind and getting to bring Ellaras in was
absolutely
really cool. Well, thanks, Josh, as always, for existing.
Thank you, Callum and Scott, equally for existing and being present.
Thank you, Scott. That's the thing we do now.
No emails except on party business. And comment suggestions and questions to thefellowshipphase@gmail.com. The long year turns to its close. Much we have accomplished these last seasons. Our fellowship disbands, but is not broken, and we will return.
On the next episode of The Fellowship Phase.